Hello everyone, it's me Andre. I bought this laptop quite recently, and the laptop that I'm using right now to do a lot of different things, like recording videos and playing things like VRChat. And in order to play VRChat in the most optimized way possible for me, I need to do a lot of different tweaks and configurations, simply in order for the game to play smoothly, without too many hitches and too many problems, at least as smooth as I can make it. So here are a few different tips that would allow you to actually run the game in an optimized fashion and actually run it faster. Now, my configuration goes like this. I have a Meta Quest 3 that I connect wirelessly through Virtual Desktop into my laptop. And when it comes to using Virtual Desktop, there are very specific tips that I really want to tell you that aren't really outlined anywhere else on the internet. I could barely find any information about these particular tips and tricks. And while I did a little bit of research with some AI chatbots, most of the research I did was by myself, just by tweaking around and poking around in the software. And the number one tip when using Virtual Desktop, always run from the desktop itself. No matter if it's SteamVR or it's the game itself or anything else, never use the menus in the Virtual Desktop app to run the actual apps. It modifies them. It modifies the way that they work on the CPUs and makes it run slower. There's a bug where if you try and run something like VRChat through Virtual Desktop's menus, it literally limits which CPUs actually run the thing, and it's not the way it's supposed to be. And because my laptop uses one of the newer CPUs from Intel, it runs on the efficiency cores, and that just slows it down tremendously. So I highly suggest you run SteamVR first from the desktop. Don't do anything else. Search for SteamVR on the Steam games, pin it to your start menu, or however it is you pin your stuff to the start menu, and you can now, and you can basically play the game, and it will load much smoother, much more smoothly than it does if you click on the menus and try to use that. Now, the second tip for you guys is use the highest frame rate. I know that it may seem weird to recommend you to do this, but here's why. When you run your VRChat or whatever this VR game that you're running at a lower frame rate, anytime that it slows down, it's gonna go to a lower frame rate than that maximum frame rate you set for it. So for example, you put the frame rate at 72 on Virtual Desktop, it will go lower than 72 if it lags out in VRChat, like, right? If it has to load all of these avatars and all of these other things because of the way that the game works. I don't know if this is applicable to other games or other experiences, but specifically for VRChat, I recommend you to run it at 120 frames if your computer can actually handle that thing. But if it can't, then try something lower, like 90 or 80 or 72, of course, depending on the kind of computer you have. But for most modern RTX type things, I highly recommend 120 hertz. If it's like one of the newer like RTX-based processors, like for example in my laptop, it's a 4050 laptop GPU. So yeah, that 120 works pretty well and seems to make the game, VRChat specifically, seems to make VRChat run smoother in VR than lower frame rates, even if technically lower frame rates are supposed to perform better. Another thing that I recommend is if you have a Quest 3 or 3S and your PC has a relatively new graphics card, like my 4050 on my laptop, I highly recommend using the AV1 codec. Now, it may be counterintuitive because, I mean, at least it may sound counterintuitive because AV1, it's very demanding and things like that, but there are good things about AV1, like, for example, the fact that it compresses things a lot better. So, a lower bitrate may be required. Maybe required to get all the data into the headset through the virtual desktop. So virtual desktop in the client itself, you set the codec to AV1, and by the way, how you do it, I can actually show you how to do it because I have the actual desktop that I have on my computer, which is this. I show it like this. There's the virtual desktop streamer. You click preferred codec, you click AV1 10-bit. Now, I recommend having this on, adaptive quantization, which divides the scene into like different parts and then has like higher like bitrate on these parts versus on other parts, and disabling 2-pass encoding, which is basically like encoding twice to improve the way that it looks or something. I don't know exactly how that works, but at the end of it all, I'm not the most expert on all of these things. So yeah, so that's that. Now there are a bunch of other tips that I want to tell you, which are, in my opinion, pretty important. The first one is going to be that if you're running VR, especially if you're running things like virtual desktop, which use, system resources and stuff like that, you should close a bunch of your background applications. Discord, Notion, file synchronization tools, like, whatever it is you use to synchronize your files. Just like whatever like random things in the background that are not the things that you need, like virtual desktop or things like that. Heck, Adobe. Close Adobe and don't run it at startup. Don't run it at startup if you need Adobe for something. By the way, I'm gonna make like a video about Affinity and the new version of Affinity and why I think it's in some ways better and in some ways worse than Adobe, but that will be probably for later. So you close all the background apps, and then you can put like shortcuts on a desktop, like I did. I put shortcuts on the far right side of my desktop for all the things that I'm going to run again once I close out of VR. I think that's really, really a nice way to like make things a lot faster. Now, before we move on to some of the other tips, I do have to mention something I didn't write down on in my notes and my bullet points, which is resolution. Yes, resolution in SteamVR in particular, because in virtual desktop, I think medium or high is a pretty good option for a majority of people. I'm not talking about that particular thing because again, it depends on the type of system that you have, and even the type of headset that you have, or the type of internet that you have, so you can see like what that happens. But when it comes to resolution on the actual VR thing in SteamVR itself, when you run VRChat, I think that the first thing you should test is the resolution that it gives you by default, which is like not the resolution that it gives you when you start VRChat, but the resolution that it gives you when you click on it and you try to move it towards like a line. There's a line somewhere, and it recommends that particular line based on different properties. So sometimes it's based on the graphics card, sometimes it's based on other things. Try that one. If it's too slow, if it's lagging out, if it's not having a good effect on your frame rate, then lower it to like a half or somewhere around the 1800, 1600 type of resolution, where both sides say roughly 1600 or 1800. something like that. If it's really getting tough, if things are going rough, if there's like if the performance is really going low, try something like 1400 by something, or things like that. Now, I have a laptop, so the next thing is one of the things I put in the script. On my laptop, there was this annoying piece of software called the OMEN Gaming Hub. It is related to the laptop manufacturer, which is HP, and it basically controls a lot of things in the background to keep the laptop healthy, for example, or to improve some aspects of its performance. But it's not great at handling certain things, and more often than not, it actually is pretty unnecessary, and it can actually impact performance like a lot. So say, for example, I'm trying to, like, I use like a method where in my setup I have like a hotspot. So my laptop acts as the hotspot from the wired broadband internet, and acts like and it like transmits the internet to the headset. With the OMEN Gaming Hub installed on my system, the Wi-Fi connection ends up being significantly slower than if I don't have that software. Because it tweaks a lot of things within like the actual computer and works within the innards of the firmware and everything. Getting all of the administrative privileges to actually like do all of these things. It tries to like do things to improve its health, like to like make sure the laptop is healthy for longer, but at the same time it causes problems and with my particular setup. So what I do is I just delete all of this bloatware, and deleting this kind of bloatware really helps, at least to me, improve a lot of performance related aspects. Now for the last like things that I want to talk about in particular is well, here are the things. It's a bunch of stuff that I run on my system. It's a bunch of different settings that I set up on my system. So let's look at, for example, at this. Transparency effects. Windows 11 has a lot of transparency effects, but are they really necessary? Like, sure, if I enable them, it's going to look beautiful. And it runs pretty fast if I'm not running VRChat. But when I am running VRChat, it does slow it down. It does cause stutters. Just like some of the other stuff like animations. And regarding animation, there are ways to delete the animations. So there's performance options, right? You can find that if you just like go and like search like in the start menu or whatever for performance. You will find adjust the performance of the system, right? So you look at that and you see, right? All of this, but normally it's like pretty much everything is turned on, but you should probably turn off most of them. Most of them should probably be turned off. Now that's another thing, and the next thing is, well, power plans. This part is still in the control panel, and for some reason they decided to just leave it there and not migrate it over to anywhere else. So it's still in the old control panel. It's in control panel, hardware and sound, and power options, and then you go into high performance. By the way, this is not the default design of control panel because I use a little app known as StartAllBack. StartAllBack makes it so that I can like tweak a lot of like settings, a lot of things to make things look a lot better, to make things feel a lot more like older systems, and even make things a lot faster for myself. And I might make a video on StartAllBack, but that would probably be another video, I guess. But yeah, this is basically how I optimize and how I do things when it comes to running VRChat for virtual desktop on my PC. Soon I might be getting an actual desktop computer so that, I can improve the performance and, actually play even more different stuff. I'm not a big gamer, but sometimes occasionally I play some games. But yeah, that was it. That was it for now. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it, because I want to make videos about the things that interest me. So, and this type of technical stuff really interests me, and I really want you to enjoy my content. Anyway, that was Andre with another technology tip, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Give a comment, like, subscribe, do the blah, 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 blah. I hope this video helped you. It was pretty fun to make, and I'll see you soon.